Thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon. It is traditional to start sessions like this by saying who we are. However, Lauren's just done that for us. So Gary is head of AI strategy, transformation delivery, and I'm a psychologist, behavioral science lead here. But actually, that is the traditional question, who are we? Whereas part of our premise today is thinking about AI in the future and how you can get moving with experimentation. There's actually a bigger and better question than who are we? What we'll be exploring today is how AI really challenges who we are as leaders. We're asking not just who are we, but who might we become as leaders? What are our identities today and how might they change? And how might experimentation help with that? At the same time, we're also asking what might our organizations become? A big theme throughout this talk, everything you'll hear, is we're not in that stable, predictable world anymore, and experimentation can help with that. If you don't know the answer to these questions, that's okay. It's okay just to say, I don't know. Experimentation can help with that as we learn our way into new ways of acting and delivering value with AI. AI is prompting us to rethink our organizations, what they are, and who we are as leaders. And so we'll be looking at experimentation for lots of reasons, but primarily from a psychological perspective, at least, because whatever your mindset is, whether you're really excited about AI, you have that discovery mindset, you're saying, let's do this now. Or if you're much more unsure about this, if you're nervous and anxious, we think that experimentation is the answer to that. If you're really excited, you're seeing as an opportunity, experimentation can help you know you're on the right path as you test and learn and get ever more confident. Whereas if you're not sure about it, if you're anxious, experimentation is a way to start working in a safe and reliable way to really figure out what's best for you and your organization. So for the next 30 minutes, we'll give you that whistle-stop tour, looking at the digital technology, a practical example of an AI lab and why that matters, and weaving throughout it the psychology of how that can really help you and your organizations create a safe space to learn. Gary.
See, set up, Jonty, but let me start with the elephant in the room. Why is this guy Craven talking about experiments? We're already doing them. And almost every organization I speak to has AI ambition. They've got pilots, they've got proof of concepts, they've got people doing demos, and in many cases they've got dozens of initiatives running at once. And yet very little of that activity survives contact with the wider organization. I heard one leader say recently, and it made me laugh, we've got more AI pilots than EasyJet, but none of them have changed how we actually work. And that sums it up. How do you turn aspiration into something that fits real processes, real systems and data, real organization constraints, and importantly, real people doing real jobs under pressure? And the leaders we're speaking to are feeling this, which is supported by industry research. They want to know, what's my return on investment? How do I ensure safe and ethical practices? Is our workforce even ready? And where do we start? So that's what we're going to tackle today. How do you move from AI as an idea to AI that will deliver meaningful impact? And to do that, we need to talk about something that often gets missed, and that's the behaviour and psychology of adoption, what my learned colleague Jonty calls the last mile problem. Jonty, why is the last mile so often behavioural?
The last mile is that gap between coming up with a brilliant solution or technology and actually getting people to adopt it. We were asked to give a very forward-facing, digitally focused webinar today, but let me just take you back 200 years to the invention of another type of technology, the telegram. All of a sudden, with a telegram, you could send a message in a matter of hours from the East Coast to the West Coast of America. But still, that last mile, someone would need to get on a bike or a horse to deliver the message itself. And it's the same with behavioural challenges with any technology, but AI in particular. You can come up with a fantastic plan. You need to think about that last mile of the behaviour. How are your people thinking, feeling, and behaving? How can you design for that? How can you include them? And that's where experimentation can really help.
Jonty, and a big reason pilots stall is that AI doesn't behave like traditional technology. So with most digital programs, you define the requirements, you design a solution, you implement it, you roll it out. It's not easy. I know I've been there, I've got the scars, but it's a shape we're familiar with. The system is wired for predictable outcomes, and you get error messages if things go wrong. But Gen AI and agentic AI is different. You can't fully specify the requirements up front, and you can't predict outcomes with certainty. The technology will always try and find a solution. I heard an interesting line at a conference recently that really stuck with me. It's a bit like a Labrador that always wants to please you. And you don't really understand the value until people are part of that journey and understanding it in context. This is a real example I've seen. A technology team spent months trying to design a knowledge assistant. They gather the requirements, they take them away, they design it, lock the scope, solution it, they test it in a controlled environment, and then it goes live. And guess what? The first time it meets the messy real world with incomplete data, edge cases, conflicting priorities, a user who's maybe got 30 seconds to make a decision on his trust and hallucination, it doesn't land with the people who need it. And it's not because it's useless, it's because it wasn't built around the reality of work. Put simply, your organization has to learn its way into AI. John, you've got a really interesting take on this as to why off-the-shelf best practices struggle here.
Yes, so a little bit of psychology and how our brains work. Our brains love by seeing a pattern and matching to that pattern. I've seen it over here. This is what I need to do over there. But as Gary just put it so eloquently, AI doesn't behave like a traditional technology. We are sort of at the frontier in different ways. And quite often, frankly, sort of as leaders, we get into positions of authority by developing our expertise and what we like to refer to as our best practice. And therefore, we try and apply that as we've done before. But we're not in that stable, predictable environment with AI. We're in a much more, complex environment with multiple challenges and multiple factors influencing lots of different things. So context really matters. You as leaders know your organization and your challenges best, but you need to then think about how do I need to be different? Who do I need to become? What should I become as a leader? What my organization become in different ways? And experimentation is really helpful in that way.
This is why experimentation as a core capability in an organization is essential. Think of it a bit like creating a living AI backbone that enables continuous innovation. Now, experimentation doesn't mean chaos. It's not a complete free for all, folks. And it doesn't mean technology teams playing with tools randomly. It's about structured learning, small focus experiments anchored in real business problems designed to generate evidence with real users who understand the process. The most effective shifts we're starting to see is when organizations stop asking, can we use this AI tool, and start asking, where's my job difficult? Or even better, what are we not doing that we could be? So start to ask yourself questions like, where does your job slow down? Where does your quality depend on people burning the midnight oil? I can picture poor Gareth in our finance department screaming at the screen now about month-end reconciliation. Where do people do the same thing 3 times because systems don't join up? What is the outcome of our customers that we want to achieve? Because if you start at these pain points and more importantly, the opportunities, experimentation stops becoming this abstract thing and only about the technology. It becomes laser focused on the business. Because, we're not really experimenting with AI technology here. We're experimenting with new and better ways of working. So that's the real opportunity when experiments start to reshape processes and decisions. And that's where actual transformation starts. But experimentation only works if everyone adopts the same mindset. So try and avoid long debates about edge cases or failure modes or workflow observability, risk scenarios. Like those debates are vital, but if you're doing them before you're learning, you're never going to start. So organizations need to absolutely adopt the culture of failing fast, but crucially entering experimentation with that MVP mindset. This is something we've thought about. We want to scale it because we believe it will add value to our business. What do we need to do to learn to prove it? And because expectations are then different, behavior will be different. You'll see users giving feedback, adapting how they use it. They'll help shape it, improve it. And that's the point. Experimentation accelerates learning. What do you think, Johnny? How do we get people to speak up and contribute? And we have a lot of leaders on the call today, hopefully. What role do they have in this?
So leaders have that critical role in fostering psychological safety in their teams. We've known for a long time that psychological safety, which is people's willingness to speak up, not feel that they'll be blamed for making mistakes, is critical to high performing teams in general. We've also known it's vital during any time of change and transformation, but it's becoming ever more important with the introduction of AI. Why? Well, because actually you need psychological safety for the successful introduction of AI. As you work in that experimental way, you want everyone's ideas to contribute. But psychological safety, even if you have a thriving culture of psychological safety at the moment, is uniquely under threat by AI. Because there's so much hype, there's so many scare stories, many of which have some validity to them. So people quite rightly are worried. So psychological safety has never been more important. And the key determinant is whether or not leaders make it safe for people to speak up. Do they frame this work in a really positive, productive way whilst acknowledging worries as a learning experience? Do people invite voice and participation? And do also leaders respond productively when they're faced with challenges from people, or do they sort of dismiss them and sort of carry on blazing their trail?
This is where an AI lab comes in. Centralized labs can help create reusable patterns, develop internal skills, and create that culture of disciplined AI exploration. So an AI lab isn't just about a team of specialists building prototypes. At its best, it should be a learning and innovation engine. Its job is to reduce uncertainty, validate value, and decide what is generally worth scaling. And that last point, decides what scales, is where most organizations struggle. So think of the front door to the lab as working hand in glove with those who understand the business best, who identify use cases they really care about. And that could be informed by research and depending on your industry and your links with academia, etc. And then get that common shared perspective on the organizational drivers, because that can weight and score the priority of those use cases, coupled with the technical feasibility to ideate on possible solutions. Then prototyping with those business SMEs to understand and demonstrate the art of the possible. That starts to give that clear strategic direction on where to start and even a backlog of work for a future roadmap. So now you're starting to breed confidence. Now you're starting to unlock future investment. And it gives control because pilots can multiply faster than decisions. Now that brings us to the door between the AI lab and the AI factory, what we like to call the proof of value. Now, the proof of value is one of the most crucial parts of the lab journey. And it's not just a proof of concept, and it's not about showing that AI can work, because most of the time we already know it can. A proof of value is about demonstrating with evidence whether it's worth scaling in your context, in your organization, and with your constraints. So you're starting to build on that ideation discovery work in the prototypes developed in the early part of the lab process. Now you aim to validate the business value, the user needs, the technical feasibility, the integration points, and your governance readiness. This is where you want to start making confident decisions. So as a leader, this is where you really want to challenge yourself and your lab team. Get your pens ready. Folks, here's a list of practical tips for you to jot down. Is there a real business case there? So that's about quantifying the benefits from those prototypes against the full cost of investment in order to improve your return on investment. Defining what value can be realized now versus over time. So immediate efficiency gains towards that true revenue societal impact that you're trying to achieve. Then you should be asking yourself, what should we actually use? This is about making disciplined build versus buy choices based on cost, capability, risk, fit, and definitely not hype. Interesting, we're starting to see trends of organizations who wanted to build their own sovereign open source tools and agents. Next, think about how it will fit within your organization. So it's assessing those integration points, the operating model fit, and the governance. I'm really recognizing that strong governance comes from leadership and it's crucial to scaling. Then, does it work in practice and will your people use it? So test it with relevant business data, not synthetic. Validating performance, business logic, and workflows, and start to surface those adoption risks early, especially through tools and processes such as user-led iteration. And finally, can and should we scale it? So proving it performs under real conditions, understanding scaling costs, including people, and start to define the features of your MVP and what your roadmap to roll out looks like, making sure you understand those measurable outcomes. So scaling becomes that deliberate evidence-based decision, and you can track those outcomes throughout deployment and into production. So look down at your pad. You should have written down ROI, risk clarity, measurable outcomes that can be tracked, a justified set of tools, evidence of integration feasibility, a working proof of concept, and a roadmap to scale. So when you ask yourself, how do I get ROI? The answer isn't buying more powerful models. It's been more rigorous in your proof of values. Now, even with a great lab process in place and really good discipline around your proof of value, you won't scale if your technology choices start to create those bottlenecks. We're seeing more organizations succeed who choose AI native platforms that can offer self-service access with guardrails. It can support multiple models that avoids vendor lock-in and allows clients to pick the right model size for their needs. It uses modular components for future proofing. It can integrate different data types or corpuses. So think of it as operational domain owned data products. And key to this is access to an environment that enables non-technical teams to participate. If only specialists can use AI safely, then your experiments are never going to scale. And you can feel that shift when it happens well. We're working with an organization who put it perfectly. We need to get our hands on it, not wait for the tech team to do it for us. The watchword here is co-design. So it's about multidisciplinary teams working together, business SMEs, data scientists, technologists, in like a product management style setup designed around service lines or core functions. Now, of course, the skills gap and workforce readiness are still major barriers, and organizations are investing heavily in AI fluency and upskilling, and something we're doing a lot of with our clients. But technology access and training only becomes meaningful when people start to think about how they embed AI into their real workflows and not sitting as a tool on someone's desktop that they don't even use. And that brings me to agency, which lies at the heart of how we should view AI technology, both in your personal life and as a leader in a business. I read a really interesting book recently by Reid Hoffman, Super Agency, that I'd recommend to most. And in fact, John, he talks about the Telegram in that book as well. And the point of that was what we're entering here in this era, which is really exciting, is that all you need is a good idea and the curiosity to explore it. I read an article recently from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who revealed that in the next couple of years, he believes we'll have the first 1 billion solo startup built by one person with a laptop and an internet connection, plus an army of AI agents. So that's an extraordinary opportunity for business now to unlock a workforce of CEOs. But for most organizations, they want to start with automation, and only a minority are truly reimagining their business. And that's natural. It's an easy story to tell, isn't it? Save time, reduce costs, increase throughput, and the data reflects that. Productivity and efficiency gains are the most commonly reported benefits so far. But organizations that get real impact don't stop at optimization. The shift happens when people start to ask a different question. If AI can help me here, what could my role become? So that's not a technical question, that's about empowerment. That's an organizational design question. So here's a real scenario we're starting to see. A frontline team could be a caseworker, could be a contact center staff or HR advisor. They're starting to use AI for the obvious things, like summarizing cases, drafting responses, pulling background information together. So the initial value is time saved, but then something more interesting starts to happen. People start using AI as a partner in judgment. They're starting to sense check decisions. They're exploring scenarios. They might prepare for a difficult conversation, and they start to spot patterns that they haven't had time to spot before. And that's the biggest change. It isn't minutes saved, it's confidence. And that's where agency really starts to appear as behavior that's taken forward. So the opportunities within reach, it's not just about learning AI into old workflows at the surface level. It's redesigning workflows so humans do what humans do best: judgment, exception handling, relationships, and AI handles the heavy lifting, all which makes strong governance and human oversight even more critical. Johnny, are you still with me? You've developed a lovely take about how the way you introduce AI shapes whether it increases confidence or triggers avoidance.
Yes. So Gary's just talked about agency, empowerment. This really goes to the heart of why experimentation in general and this AI lab approach specifically For me, it's just brilliant, fantastic psychology that really helps with people's motivations. And this model that we use helps people think about people's motivations sort of in the round. So Gary just mentioned that the easy things to evidence, maybe the cost savings, there's so much more to the potential of AI than that. And so we use this framework that says that each of us at work, everyone on this call, is motivated by three core things. One is we like to do work that's meaningful and purposeful. We also like to get ahead, we like to achieve things, but we also have needs to get along. So that sense of affiliation, connection, and belonging that we have at work. These manifest in different ways for different people, but fundamentally, these are three things that we're all looking for at work. But taking this experimental approach can really help thinking about how can we boost people's motivation and how can we avoid anything that would really harm people's motivation as we increasingly introduce AI and adopt it in the way in which we recommend. So to bring this to life, here are some quotes from a recent AI lab that we're running. So in terms of the first master motivation, finding meaning, will AI actually help people do work that is purposeful? So one person said, what we do is massive for the country, working in national security. I can see how AI in this context could really help with the mission. In terms of getting ahead, as I said, this is about people feeling they can contribute, achieve, and grow. By working in this way, in this space, you're creating space for people to learn and contribute. This person said, I felt empowered. We got a chance to have a say. It connects us to the work. And lastly, but I would argue probably most importantly, working this way can really boost people's sense of belonging and connection. If anything, this is the motivation that is most under threat by AI, taken at face value. I recently heard AI being described as being like on single player mode in a video game. Here in Gary's scenario or Saltman's scenario, that first solo billionaire, one person with an army of agents, it's just you and the agents, you're just by yourself. So AI is that real threat actually to what so many people get out of work, which is connection and belonging. There are ways of introducing AI in general and specifically with the AI lab that can actually boost people's sense of connection. So the fact that people came together from cross-disciplinary teams to share ideas, they say, I love that we worked as a team. I think the part of AI that scares me the most is losing the support of the team. So I argue everyone on this call should be thinking about how can we nurture these motivations in the round as we introduce AI. And experimentation is a great way to do that, not least in terms of thinking about our own behaviors. So we started by saying we have this challenge, not who we are today, but who might we become in the future. And for that, it's best to be playful, experimental, and curious. Traditionally, we might think you change how you think to change how you act, but behavioral science shows us that actually it works the other way around. You start with tiny experiments, and over time, you internalize those beliefs. You don't go from the couch to 5K overnight. Maybe you start taking small steps, put the running shoes by the bed, and over time you start to think of yourself as someone who exercises in that way. And it's the same with any behavior change. So how can you as leaders start to experiment with your own behaviors and really live some of the approaches that we've been sharing with you today? So in the lab, what we're seeing is that it creates ripple effects across organizations by thinking about it. Just to give you one example, we recently worked with a team and it came out that people quite naturally were worried about the environmental impact of AI. When we played this back to the senior leadership team, one of the leaders had a very traditional approach. At first, he said, I'm thinking I need an elevator pitch here. I just need to know the answers and I need to broadcast that to everyone in my organization. And then because we'd explored with them about it's often not what you say, but what people say to themselves and how you interact with people that matters, they went away and experimented with different ways of talking to people. So rather than creating that elevator pitch to broadcast to people, what he did, and reflected back on it, was I asked my team, rather than giving them the answer, how do you think we should approach the environmental impact? How would you like to go away and research it? But it's really empowering people and keeping what humans do best at the forefront of this introduction of this technology. As you think about your experiments, we have a handy framework to share with you, which, just in the AI labs, we have hypotheses that we test. When thinking about your own behavior, think about what will have a positive impact on the motivation of your people. Explore that, decide what is safe to try in that way, and then come back together and reflect what went well, what didn't go so well. Often that's where the biggest learnings are, and then decide what's next. We're working in that practical way with leadership teams to sort of apply everything you've heard this week from Becky and Susanna and here today to really make sure you have the behaviors and the psychology that goes alongside other initiatives. If you don't know where to start with your experiments, start with the minimal valuable experiments. And really, anything is fair game. anything and everything that you think will boost motivation and address people's fears. But to return to one of the themes that we came on, it's okay if you don't know your people's motivations. A big part of this is that we need to get back to really knowing our people and listening to them. If you don't know where to start, ask, be curious, get to know your people. That could be your first experiment. Gary.
You, Jonty. So just wrapping up then, folks, and thanks for your attendance. I guess the key themes that we're trying to reinforce is that AI success isn't just about tools, it's about how organizations learn. And the organizations that succeed experiment deliberately, use proof of value to make evidence-based decisions, and they choose technology that enables participation and co-design, and they allow the roles and the processes to evolve through usage. Then once value is proven, the focus now needs to shift towards the operational reality and what we call the AI factory. But unfortunately, we're out of time today, so tune in next time to hear about the AI factory, or just give me a call. As is the norm of these type of webinars, I just wanted to leave you with a little soundbite. AI won't transform your organization unless you build the conditions to learn, prove value, and scale what works safely and with people at the center. So this was the third and final session of our AI for Leaders series. Hopefully you found that a fresh perspective. I think it was, but then I'm fairly biased. We will of course be sharing all of these recordings with you very soon, and of course feel free to share them with your teams. We'd welcome your feedback on today's sessions and the ones that preceded it. Let us know what you found most useful. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.